today I have Joe Valley, an authority in the space of exiting businesses, author of the EXITpreneur's Playbook.
From 2010 to 2020, I had over 8,000 one-on-one conversations with entrepreneurs that wanted to exit their business. If the owner of the business is the marketing agency, is the PPC guy, is the copywriter, is the brand creator, that's a harder to transfer bit of knowledge. If I'm not cautious, I could promote myself to my level of incompetence. You may be a bootstrap entrepreneur that can go from 0 to 5 million in revenue, but can you go from 5 to 100?
Welcome, everybody. This is Kris Sugatan of Sugatan.io. Welcome to our podcast. And today I have Joe Valley, who is an authority in the space of exiting businesses. He's the author of the EXITpreneur's Playbook. I actually heard of Joe Valley through the Trends group as being the go-to person that people are directly going to about advice on how to exit their businesses. And with great credibility, Joe, because you've gone through the entrepreneur journey yourself, right? You've done 100 million in transaction and facilitated about $500 million in exits as well through Quiet Light Firm brokerage, which is something that you spearheaded yourself after going through the years of experience in building businesses. And it's really impressive because let me just tell you from my perspective, I started Sugatan in 2018, and at that time, e-commerce growth hacking wasn't as big as it is today. The way that e-commerce has evolved is a lot of agency owners has actually raised 20 million and from VCs and investment firms so that they can grow multiple smaller e-commerce businesses and take them to exit. This is happening all over e-commerce, so definitely CPG as well as SaaS. And so this is a huge topic inside e-commerce right now. And um, but the knowledge is still kind of closed a little bit, and I'm pretty sure that that's why you authored the EXITpreneur's Playbook, just to give it some light, because it is a very confusing, I think, process to navigate through. Perhaps there's a lot of hearsay out there about some of the maybe myths, but there isn't really anybody that's actually really guiding a lot of the e-commerce founders currently. So I'm super excited to speak with you and to just pick your brain. But first, let's go into your background a little bit. Like, what led you here?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Kris. I appreciate it. Yeah, you beginning in 2018. I started in 1997. I built my first website for $50 back then. I was doing radio direct response marketing, though. It was very different, but needed a
Oh my
website.
gosh.
Yeah, needed a website at the time. And eventually took my business 100% online in 2005 and ran that last e-commerce business through the best of and the worst of the economy, came out the other end in early 2010, tired, just wanting to move on. Just because even though it was going well, I was just emotionally exhausted from the Great Recession there. And I reached out to 3 business brokerage firms at the time that specialized in the online space, and Quiet Light was the one that was actually helpful. The other 2 were just trying to get their hooks into me for a commission, so it felt kind of icky. Mark, who was the original founder of Quiet Light, founded in 2007, gave me some advice, which was, don't sell yet, Joe. Hold on another 6 months. Hold on. I said, hold on another 6 months based upon the trends that are happening. Your business is growing again. I think you'll make another 6 figures. And he's the only one that actually basically gave me advice that was in my best interest. So I took it, loved the guy, held off 6 months, reached back out, had Jason, who was still an advisor at Quiet Light, work with me to help me exit my business. And then I took 2011 off, joined the firm in 2012 because I really just enjoyed the experience. And it was me, Mark, and Jason. And then Amanda joined shortly after. Now we've got 15 advisors. They're all entrepreneurs first and foremost, like yourself, and then they became advisors. All of them have built, bought, or sold their own online businesses and help others in the online space as well. We closed just under 250 million in total transactions last year, which is mind blowing for me. The average transaction was about 1.8 million, whereas back in 2012, I think it might have been 125,000. So
Oh,
the
wow.
world's changed a little bit. And the access to information to grow your e-commerce business is so much better with your group, with podcasts, with masterminds. I didn't have that back in
I know.
2005, 6, 7, 8. I had my developer, and all we did was argue because he wanted me to spend a lot of money, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money.
100%.
But there's so much information out there to help you grow your business. There wasn't really one source or one place to go to
Yeah.
fully understand the exit of your business in a way that was digestible. From 2010 to 2020, I had over 8,000 one-on-one conversations with entrepreneurs that wanted to exit their business. But even with those conversations, it's like drinking through a fire hose. I can't get enough information. I give information out. It's hard to digest and absorb. So they could take that, they could go to our website at Quiet Light and digest that information, or Website Closers, FE International, any of them, and try to piece it all together. And it just wasn't enough. It wasn't working. So I had to put pen to paper, as they say. Of course, it wasn't pen to paper. It was all electronic, and wrote the EXITpreneur's Playbook, which gives a full journey, my full journey, but tells lots of success stories, lots of failures of people that went before those reading, trying to exit their businesses. And it every question that you would have about valuations, about multiples, about SaaS multiples, content multiples, e-commerce multiples, FBA multiples, about all of that, about multiple of what, it's all in the book. And then from listing the business and due diligence, how to negotiate with buyers and letters of intent, all of it, it's there. And hopefully I wrote it in a way that comes across as if we're just having a beer across a pub, a bar
Yeah.
or something like that. It's not high level
You know what
stuff.
I really liked about, when reading your book? I'm a first time entrepreneur. I was actually a accidental career waitress.
Mm.
By my 6th year, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm still waitressing.
That was
How did
impressive,
this
though. To be able to do it that long is impressive. I got
I know.
fired from two of my waiting jobs.
Oh my gosh, I should have gotten fired multiple times, but for some reason they kept me along. But I think that what I've learned during my entrepreneurial journey is the importance of having clarity,
Yeah.
and having that level of clarity that is used as the framework in which you make decisions around. And what you really emphasize in your book is about that you have to be intentional about exiting from the very beginning and knowing what are the pillars of value, is what you call them.
Look
Like,
at that.
it's
You did read.
knowing. Yeah, well, it's really, I think that that was actually the most, I think even for me, and I think that a lot of people that is listening, everybody's relating it back to their own experience, right? And even with the e-commerce entrepreneurs that I work with, I always ask them, what is your vision
Yeah.
for this brand long term? And the very basics about, we have like two spreadsheets where we come up with what we call the total ROAS KPI ultimately. Do you want to be growth focused, or do you want to be EBIT focused? We kind of have to start there with them, and we have to educate them that if you're EBIT focused, meaning, hey, you want, 10 to 30% EBIT at the end of the month, that just means that you are basically hampering down the level of growth that you can achieve if you reinvest everything back into the business to acquire new customers, for example. And then I find now these are businesses again that are making, you know, somewhere between 30,000 per month all the way to 300,000 per month in revenue. And all they're doing is really playing the game without there being this long view of what's, because I don't even think that they realize what is possible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I
And
think that's a huge mistake. You know, my first business that I launched in 97, my goal was to make $50,000 in 1998. And I made about a half
right,
million dollars. So I 10 times my goal, and I was running an agency, and I never thought I could sell it. So it never occurred to me to sell it
right,
because it was Joe Valley's agency and I was the name in the face. I was wrong, Kris. I could have sold that for multiple millions of dollars. Instead, I pivoted, went to product marketing, built a brand, and then I exited that. I could have done both. And I think most of your audience members that are growing an e-commerce business, the odds are pretty strong that their business is most likely their most valuable asset. Yet they don't understand what it's worth. And
sure,
so you're, two different paths, building the bottom line numbers versus, building it to exit are important to understand. And on building to exit, what I do is I teach them to set proper goals. You know, not like I want to sell my business for $1 million, but get more granular. Like I will sell my business for $1 million in the first quarter of 2023. And when I do, I will feel XYZ. I will feel amazing because I'll be able to take 2 months off and spend more time with my family. But get very specific with that. And that's a goal. But what you've got to do then is to reverse engineer a path to that goal. And if you don't know where you are today in terms of your value, you don't know how close or how far you are from that exit goal. So the thing you've got to really understand is what brings value and plummets value, those four pillars of value that I talk about in the book, but also the basic valuation formula, and then the
mhm,
18 different types of add backs that I cover in the book in order to get to what's called seller's discretionary earnings. Because the business isn't valued at a multiple of EBITDA, it's sort of an adjusted EBITDA, a multiple of seller's discretionary earnings. And that all of that knowledge it's critical to understand if you are setting a goal to exit your business someday.
see, that's super interesting, because and before we go into the super like the very granular, let's say, levers that you can, build upon,
Mhm.
before we even go into that, I think that, my question to you is it possible for any e-com founder to sort of like hang on to a benchmark at first, um, to then gauge I'm doing well or not doing well? And is that benchmark, like you said, that getting that level of clarity about what the outcome is that you're actually going for and then working your way backwards? Like, or can the benchmark happen when they make it very clear, I want to make 1 million, I want to exit by 2023?
Mm.
And then is there a benchmark that they can be like, all right, where is my starting point right now? And am I doing well or am I doing below
Yeah, so
average? Like,
yeah, they could go with benchmarks, but it's there's too many variables that go into putting a
yeah,
value on a business to just go, oh, well, the average multiple is 3 times. So therefore,
right.
if mine is doing 100 in discretionary, it's worth 300, or 1 million, it's
Yeah.
worth 3 million. That's, I just did a evaluation for a company that, um, didn't, they had a value, they had an offer already, essentially. Um, Very big company, 50 million in revenue, um, huge numbers, huge numbers. The multiples were 10 times. Uh,
Hmm.
but they didn't, if they used benchmarks, they would have sold their business for $6 million less than it was worth. Okay. So they,
Got
they
it.
didn't do, they did do an add back for what's called cashback monies, right? So if you're spending advertising dollars or whatever dollars and you're using a cashback card, most people slide that over to their personal account,
Yeah.
right? 90%. And that's
Right.
okay.
Right. Right.
Cashback is a discount on advertising. In his case, he was getting $50,000 a month in cashback money because he was doing
Right.
credit card stacking and spends a
Right.
lot of dough. That
Right.
over
Right.
a 12-month period is $600,000 in
100,000.
cashback, not on his P&L.
Right.
You've got to add it to your P&L after it's exported to Excel in what's called an add back schedule.
And
600,000
then,
times his 10-time multiple, that's $6 million that he would have
right,
lost.
exactly.
So I don't,
That's so fascinating because, by the way, we do so much ad spend, and so that cashback is actually a big deal because, you know, Amex or whatever, they like give the incentivization for those cashbacks. Yeah.
yeah, and you can convert Amex to dollars, right? It's one, I get rewards. We use reward points because we use it to
Right.
travel. But if we were selling the business, we'd on paper convert those to dollars at their 1% ratio. The credit card company usually has that ratio. So
Yeah.
the point is that you can get, I think you need to get more granular and understand the nuances of how valuations are done and what brings value much more than just general benchmarks.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Well, so let's go into I think this is a good time to go into those four pillars, which to me, um, I think it's really important to go into like just have the principles around it.
Mm,
So the number one thing, obviously, like, well, those four pillars is risk, transferability, documentation, and growth.
right.
And I think that that is actually really good anchors because let's go into risk. I mean, like, or maybe let's just say the weight of each one of them. Are they all weighted equally in terms of valuation, or is there one that is more we need to focus on?
Yeah, yeah. So those four pillars, by the way, are not really things that I decided or Quiet Light decided were important. It's what buyers decided were important, right? Over the last, how many years has it been now? 15? The Quiet Light's been around, right? Buyers are constantly asking these same questions and drilling down into businesses with these questions. And we kept pulling those questions out. And it turns out these are the four pillars of value: risk, growth, transferability, and documentation. Um,
Mhm.
they're all kind of equal. But if one is really weak, it could plummet the value of the business. Start with documentation, right? That's the fourth pillar, but it's really the beginning of your valuation process. If you're not using professional accounting software like QuickBooks or Xero, and you don't have a proper P&L to look at, your advisor to look at, or somebody to help you, or even you, if you're going to read the book and do your own valuation, you can't even get out of the starting gate in terms of what the business is worth, right? So I'm a big advocate of using an e-commerce bookkeeper that costs less than a lease of a decent car, and they get the numbers right for you, and they do it with accrual accounting. So documentation really is, the beginning of understanding the true value of your business. But if you go back over to that first one, risk, by the way, under each of these pillars, there's 6 different levels to each, and we won't go into the weeds too much on all of them. But with risk, a couple that you would look at are, hero SKUs, for instance, right? A hero SKU
Right.
is a brand that has one SKU that's doing 60-70% of all of their revenue. Some business owners would say, well, that's a benefit because it's so much easier. I've only got 4 SKUs to focus on, and one does 70% of my revenue. And I've heard that story before. And then Facebook, messes with the algorithm, and that ad for that one hero SKU doesn't work anymore, and the value of the business plummets by 80%. So buyers are going to look at that and go, okay, where's the risk of this business? If something changes on that one SKU, if competition comes in, et cetera, the value is the risk is high. And when the risk is high, the value or your multiple goes down. So you want to make sure that you're building a business that is going to be as secure and safe for buyers to take over as possible. Stop thinking about yourself, stop thinking about your cash, and build a business for a great buyer to take over at a great price. And that's when you're going to get that higher multiple, and you'll get paid at the end of the day. Other things in the risk area are um, too much dependency on you as the owner. If you're the name and
Mhm.
face of your business, it's harder to transfer to a new owner.
Mhm.
If you have a brand that is, goes obsolete every couple of years, that's fear of obsolescence, and buyers are really hesitant to jump on that bandwagon. I sold a brand that was an electronics charging station, essentially, with plugs and everything for your iPad and phones and things of this nature. 70% of their revenue was that one SKU. And then on top of that, all buyers were afraid that plug-in stuff was going to go away and everything was going to go wireless. So it was a very, very tough sell. It happened, but it was still very tough. So we had to
Yeah.
start with a lower multiple, and then we had to really, structure the deal to make it safe for buyers because there was that big fear of obsolescence. The most important thing, I think, for business owners to think about in terms of risk, growth, transferability, and documentation is don't ignore them just because it's not math. Because, if you go back to that benchmark, oh, well, 3 to 4 time multiple. If you are weak in all of these areas or 2 of the 4, you're not going to be at 3 to 4. You're going to be at 2.5. And that is a huge valuation change
Yeah.
when it comes to the overall value of your business. Uh, Transferability, Kris, is probably the easiest one to understand. It should go without saying. If the assets of the business that drive revenue are not transferable, you do not have a sellable business.
Mm-hmm.
Simple, right? I sold a business for a guy named Mike Jackness once, who runs a podcast as well called Ecom Crew. And we've talked about his business on my podcast, on his. It's called Color It. And at one point, I talk about in the book as well, at one point, Mike had another brand that he wanted to sell off. It was his biggest brand. He had 4. He wanted to sell off his biggest brand. One SKU in that brand was representing 50% of all of the revenue, which wasn't a huge problem, but somebody else owned that SKU and gave Mike the online rights to sell it. Well, when it came time to sell that brand with that SKU involved, that person that owned the rights didn't feel comfortable allowing Mike to sell it and transfer those rights to anyone else. Dead in the water, an unsellable business. He's since worked it out with that person, but it made it a non-saleable business because 50% of the revenue was, well, we could have sold it, but not for what he wanted to sell it for. So
Yeah.
transferability is pretty important. Growth, sell the business while it's growing, not declining. Simple as that. Clear paths to growth in the future, meaning have you maxed out the revenues of the business, or is there still room for growth? If you've launched 16 SKUs in the history of the business, but 6 of those are in the last 12 months, and they're already representing 40% of the revenue, that's a built-in path to growth because they're probably not all around for 12 months. It's going to grow. Buyers love built-in paths to growth. They're not buying this for an ATM machine to take out money. They want to see it grow because they understand that they will make more money when they sell the business than they will from buying it and holding it. So risk,
Question for
growth,
you.
transferability, and documentation.
From the time that somebody approaches you and says, all right, we're ready to get to a place where we're exiting this business. Is
Mhm.
there like an average time frame that somebody can expect for the deal to actually close
Yeah,
from a
well,
buyer?
once it's listed for sale, the average
Mm-hmm.
time in the last 12 months has been 89 days from listed to money changing hands. The average time. Now, keep in mind that we did deals as low as 250,000 up to 15 million in 2021. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but ideally, Kris, I don't want people to wake up and decide to sell their business. That's what I did back in 2010. Fortunately, I
Right.
had somebody say, wait 6 months. When you wake up and decide to sell your business, you can't pull or push the levers that will bring more value
Right.
and a stronger
Yeah.
multiple. So
Yeah.
ideally, I would like people to reach out 12 months in advance, pick up the book, read it. A lot of people are much more comfortable learning on their own before speaking to an advisor. And a lot of people these days are trying to sell directly to aggregators. If you do that, please read the book because it's going to add so much value to your business. The aggregators, if you're not familiar with them, are those that are rolling up FBA businesses, and eventually they'll roll up just e-commerce businesses because they can't get enough FBA businesses. They're smart, they're charming, they're well funded, they're likable, they're going to make you feel amazing about yourself and your business. And all 5 of those things make them dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to convince you your business is worth X and they know what they're talking about. So you're not going to get a better offer. And we close in 30 days and avoid the broker fee. You can still work with
Yeah.
them and close with them, but make sure you're presenting your business to multiple buyers so that there's competition. I've seen a value this is the best you're going to get a value at 2.2 million. And we ended up selling it for 5.5 million. So you got to be real careful with the
Yeah,
aggregators. Yeah.
that's so interesting. And for e-commerce in particular, what is like I don't want to say the most successful because that's usually like a very small percentage in terms of it being actually realistic. But like, what are the more successful exits within e-commerce that you've seen where, yeah.
Yeah, I actually just had a guy named Keith Leinbach on the Quiet Light podcast to tell his story of acquisition entrepreneurship and then exitpreneurship. So Keith bought a business from Quiet Light for $400,000. He's a former CEO and COO, spent 25 years of his life in the corporate world. Um,
Hmm.
and really learned how to delegate. He knew absolutely nothing about e-commerce though. Okay. Yet he went out
Yeah.
and bought a $400,000 e-commerce business. And within 6 months, he had 10 times the revenue of that business. And he did it through delegation. He searched the world for the best digital marketing firm that he could find. Turned out to be somebody that lived 2 towns over and ended up hiring the person directly. And the guy shut down his
Mhm.
agency. Within 30 months, Keith sold that business for mid 8 figures. Well, let me adjust that down. Around $15 million. Bought it for
Mhm.
400, sold it for 15.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, when I interviewed Keith, he talked about the things that were important to the buyer. Okay. He had an offer at one point, one under letter of intent, and it fell through, and it took another year to sell the business. He did all of this on his own, actually, without an advisor. He ended up selling it to his largest vendor. That's how it worked. But he had looked at the risk factor. He had one manufacturer up in the Northwest was concerned about forest fires and supply chain issues. So he thought, you know what? I'm going to de-risk that. I'm going to set up different manufacturing facilities around the country. Found some, did that. They had 3 manufacturing facilities around the country. He looked at a number of different risk factors that were not financial and just shored them up and made it safer for a buyer. And he talked about as he went through due diligence, those were all the things that the buyer looked at and said, look, we're concerned about supply chain. Oh, look, you've got three different all around the country. This is amazing. We're concerned about this. You fixed it. You filed for a patent. This is one of the things he did. The main product had already been out there in the market for 6 or 7 years. He tweaked it, redesigned it a little bit, and filed for a utility patent. Failed the first time because he didn't hire the best utility patent firm. Spent, as he said, a small fortune on another one. It took 9 months, but he got the utility patent. And that was the defensibility part that the buyer loved so much. And now
Right.
they can blow that business up even further. The other thing that he did really well, and you listeners, you can add or subtract zeros as you want. You could buy it for 40,000 and sell it for 400 or whatever. In Keith's situation, he again he really delegated very, very well. He didn't know how to build. He doesn't even have Facebook. He didn't know how to do Facebook advertising. He didn't
Yeah.
know all of that, but he found the right people like you to help him with that, and then built a business with an exit in mind. And so in 30 months, he made more money in his life than he did from working as a CEO and COO for 25 years.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
again, add or subtract zeros as necessary to fit your own story. But the point is that he really focused on growth. He really knew what the value of the business was all along the way. He's a reader of the Entrepreneur's Playbook. He's an acquisition entrepreneur. He bought a business, so he understood valuations and things of that nature. And he learned it all. When you go blindly into it and you're running your business just trying to keep the wheels on the bus, which is often the case in the first few years, and you don't pick your head up and have a plan like you talked about early on, you're going to wind up in a situation where you're just going to be emotionally tired, worn out. Business isn't growing great, and you're going to sell at a value that is less than what you deserve because you've risked everything to build this business. You should
Yes.
take the extra time to understand its value so you can sell it for maximum value when the time is right. Not do what I did on my first business, which was just pivoted away from it because I didn't know any better.
I'm gonna go into a typical scenario that we come across, and then and then ask for your specific advice.
Okay.
Um, the typical scenario we work with, um, you know, inside Sugatan, our strength is we know how to take something viral. And that virality, for example, if and this was our latest case study. They were like, the Great Gatsby. They were like Gatsby shoes, so they're designed like of that era. And he came, and at first we were like, are you drop shipping? I mean, it was like so bad. His website was terrible. The packaging that the product came in was really bad. Um, and he probably had 5 working assets for creatives for us to work with. And, but we're like, you know what? As long as you're not drop shipping, the signals, when I audited his account, the signals were there that the market was ready and that the cost of advertising was going to be low enough to actually make the acquisition profitable to the founder. And that was the only reason why I said yes. One, it wasn't a drop shipping product, and then number two, the market was signaling that they were ready for this. And he had built it to 100,000 per month in revenue. And what we did was we just basically we do this intense market research for us to essentially understand not avatar segmentation. We don't do like audience-based segmentation and create messaging specifically for that particular audience. We actually go into understanding what are the common pain points across that transcends audiences, and that is one of the key aspects of creating something that goes viral. And then doing the competitive intelligence analysis, and then doing the copy mining. So we mine hundreds and hundreds of copies from other similar primary competitors and secondary competitors, and we pull essentially what are the common motivations as to why they bought, common anxieties from when they buy it, what are they anxious about, and then when they did buy it, what are the common values that they got when they did the things that the problems it did solve for them. And then we take all of that, and then we essentially create 3 batches of creatives that is intent to go viral. So that's what we're really good at. And so this particular the most recent scale that we did, we took them from 100,000 to 500,000 per month in revenue. We did that in 6 months. Now, this is like a normal trajectory for us. Skincare brand, we took them from 392,000 per month in revenue in January. And then by October, they were doing 1.8 million per month in revenue. And this is just us pumping out viral ads, essentially. What we found though is that, I'm an entrepreneur. I mean, like I think that coming out of like a waitress background, I thought I didn't know anything about anything. I just thought, how do you like take $1 and turn it into $3? That was like my thing. And I thought that if you knew how to do that, that would be something really special, and that would be a skill that can be transferable for the rest of my life. And but what I found over time is that this model, this level of growth for sure is totally, it's like a one-legged stool almost, you know? And in the sense of the growth is predicated on, let's just say, viral ads, and um it's not really building the brand equity aspect of it, although it could, because what we've done is we've put it out there. A lot of people learn about the brand, et cetera, et cetera. But then as soon as these ads, let's just say we turn them off, the sales don't are not consistent. It's only the ads that make consistent sales, that they can go from 100,000 to 500,000 per month on a stable basis. So that's sort of like what I've observed. And I think for me, I'm asking this question because now I'm going to ask about what you think. What is your advice on that? What is like, what are some of the things that you would initially just be like, this is what you need to think about?
Well, I think every business that I've looked at over the last decade and my own businesses that I ran, Kris, if I turned off the advertising, revenue would have dropped substantially.
Right.
I did
Yeah.
it, right? I stopped, dramatically reduced my PPC ads when I was in a bad mood one day and Amex pissed me off. So I'm like, I'll show them, and I cut my spending. They won't get as much. It was just stupid. It was, I paid the price of
Right.
that. I didn't hurt
Yeah.
Amex. So it's without advertising dollars. The revenue should drop. The key thing that I would focus on in, let's say, the men's skincare area is what is happening with the recurring revenue rate. That's one thing I would dial in on if I'm doing a valuation on the business, or if I'm a buyer. I'm going to look at your revenue's growing like crazy. Okay, well, with that, revenue as a percentage, recurring revenue as a percentage of total revenue, how's that graph line looking? And I would really focus in on that. And is it now 15%? Is it 20? And compare it to the previous year? Because that's something that buyers are going to be really interested in, and the lifetime value of a customer as well. With the shoe company that you're referring to, how can you create, a second and third purchase from that customer? Are there additional
Yeah.
shoes? Is there a particular polish? Is there funky shoelaces that they can buy that have your brand on them to create the repeat customer? It's not recurring revenue in that situation, but maybe they're a repeat customer.
Yeah.
That type of thing I would focus in on. But
Yeah.
the bottom line is that any business that I've looked at or sold in the last decade, if they'd stop the advertising, the revenue would certainly drop.
Well, that is music to my ears, Joe. So thank you so much for
Yeah. And
that.
it's interesting in your situation, your clients that use your services, I think would open up the buyer pool even more, right? If the owner of the business is the marketing agency, is the PPC guy, is the copywriter, is the brand creator, if they do all of them things themselves, that's a harder to transfer bit of knowledge, right? And if I'm leaving the corporate world and I want to buy an online business, I'm going to be a little fearful that everything that's in your head is going to be harder for me to take on. So to overcome that fear, I'm going to require that you stick around for a longer training and transition period. But
Mhm.
if I had Sugatan as the agency and I'm the brand owner, that relationship would be transferable. And a new buyer would come in and go, man, she's doing great. I'm going to stick with that. This is going to make my life easier. And all I need to do is to develop more products for her to then, grow my revenue and de-risk my company. So I think using an agency when you can find a great one like yours is really, really valuable.
That's actually really interesting that you bring that up because there is a lot of, let's just say, assumptions that you actually need to bring it in-house in order to increase
No,
or maybe de-risk. No, right?
no,
It's
no,
like
no, no. Just the opposite.
you
Right.
just
Come on
already
now.
gave so much Joe, that alone.
Yeah, I mean,
Because a lot of,
there's the perception of dollars saved, right? We're not paying you that percentage of sales or whatever your fee is anymore. But
yeah.
if you did that in the last 12 months, like let's say I'm that brand owner and I'm your client, and I
Mhm.
decide I'm going to sell my business, and in order to improve my bottom line to get the highest discretionary earnings I can in these last 12 months, I'm going to stop working with Sugatan. Right. And
Mhm.
I'm gonna just take over all the marketing myself. The buyers are gonna look at that and go, all right, well, clearly they're just cutting costs to improve the discretionary earnings. That's increasing the risk of the business. There's going to be a lag for 2, 3, 4 months. Maybe not a lot is going to change. But as you do new ads all the time, I would imagine you don't do one ad for this customer for
Oh
lifetime,
no, yeah.
right? You're
Yeah.
constantly producing new ads. I don't have that skill anymore. You made it look easy, So I said to myself, and this is a huge mistake, people, I said to myself, I can do that, right? And I didn't really value the services that you brought. That is a critical error if I did that. I could do that. No, I can't. You do that really well. I develop the brand. I develop the product and the SKUs. And I delegate to you, and you do an amazing job. Therefore, you should get paid because you're helping me grow my brand. If I cut you to cut costs, a buyer is going to see that happened in due diligence. It's going to increase their fear and concern and reduce their trust in me because I cut the costs. And when the trust is reduced, the risk goes up, and the value or the structure of any deal is going to go down.
It's
Right?
gonna go down,
Maybe
yeah.
maybe we'll still close the deal, but because I eroded trust, they're not going to give me an all cash deal. Now they're going to give me 60% cash, 20% seller note, and a 20% earnout. And I'm not going to sleep as well at night because I didn't get all cash for the business. So you
Right.
mess around with those things because you think you're outsmarting the buyer. You are dead wrong. Buyers are intelligent. If they can stroke a check for $1 million, they're not idiots. So
Right.
simply just run your business, make it a great business for a great buyer to take over at a great price, and you will succeed in the end.
That probably is a similar concept on the manufacturing aspect of it, right? So there are some founders who, for example, they don't want to rely on overseas manufacturers because for XYZ reason, they're not actually producing the formula consistently. And it's a nightmare to deal with them. And so then they think about, okay, now let's actually rent a warehouse, start buying the machine so that they can have more control over that. Now, does that increase risk in your opinion or in your experience, or does that actually add value?
No, I would say that decreased risk because I've got complete
Yeah,
control over the supply chain now.
right.
But it also
Yeah,
increases the amount of work and overhead that I have.
100%.
And I would say it reduces the potential buyer pool because a lot of e-commerce business wannabe owners want to live a remote lifestyle. They want to live and work from wherever in the world they are. Right? You're in New York now. It's going to be you're going to get very sick of the cold. You probably already are, and you're going to be like, you know what? Miami's pretty nice this time of year. You want to pick up and go to Miami? You're laughing because you're thinking this already. So if you have a manufacturing facility that now needs to be operated in Croton on Hudson, then that's something that I don't want as a buyer. Not as many buyers want that. There's value, I think, in it, but you shrink the buyer pool essentially. So yes, it adds value in the sense that it de-risks the company. Your margins are probably better, so your bottom line numbers are probably higher. But you minimize the buyer pool. So if you are doing $100,000 a month in revenue, I would say you don't do that. If you're doing
Yeah.
$1 million in revenue, then you do. And the reason is because your buyer is going to be different. So you're doing 12 million in revenue now, which means you're
Mhm.
probably doing 2.4 to 3 million in discretionary earnings. Now you're looking at a 15 to 20 million dollar valuation. That's a completely different buyer than somebody that's buying a business for $600,000. That
Right.
$600,000 buyer doesn't want to own and operate a manufacturing facility. The other buyer, who's probably a portfolio investor, perfectly fine with that. They'll put somebody in place to operate that manufacturing facility, and they don't care where it is.
And am I hearing correctly in that you want a larger buyer pool that you have access to, probably because then there's going to be competing bids that
Yeah,
increase that could potentially? Yeah.
yeah, you're hearing it exactly right. Last year,
Yeah.
we had, in the last 12 months, we had an average of 3.7 offers on every single listing. There are more buyers than there are sellers at the moment. 62% of our listings sold at or over asking price because of the competitive nature of the marketplace. Whereas if you
Interesting.
imagine going on to Shark Tank, right? You probably met some people that have been on Shark Tank. We've met lots of them. One of our advisors did a deal with Robert on Shark Tank.
Hmm.
And his name is Pat, right? He owns a company called buyhappyfeet.com. It's a plush
Hmm.
slipper company. So he prepared for his presentation. He worked his pitch. He practices in front of his wife, and she criticized him and told him how to fix it. And he was ready. He walks into the Shark Tank, and imagine he's ready to pitch to all 5 investors, but only one is there. Everybody calls him sick, but Mr. Wonderful. If that was the case, then he would have gotten a royalty deal at best, right?
Right.
Not very
Yeah.
competitive. Instead, there were 5 sharks bidding for Pat's business, which brought the overall value up, and the deal structure was
Yeah.
better. So broader buyer pool, the bigger the buyer pool, the better in my experience. But things change as your business grows up in size.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to keep that in mind as well.
Is there like a for maybe somebody who, this is their first time, let's just say this Gatsby shoes founder, who's young, by the way, he's
Mm-hmm.
like, I think 19, maybe 20 years old, very young. And there's a lot more of those cropping up. Like, I remember one time I came into I closed a deal. He was still in high school and he could not transfer and pay our invoice because he had like his parents were the bottleneck or something like that. It's insane. And they're just getting younger now. Obviously, that's not the case on the average, but it's really fascinating. But for this, let's just say the Gatsby founder, um, how does he know when it's the right time to sell?
Well, it
Is it
starts with setting goals. Starts with
it
setting
starts
goals,
it
right?
starts with
So
him knowing like what he
yeah,
wants as an outcome, right?
yeah, and a lot of people say you set your goal and you focus on it and you stick to it. I like setting goals that are very specific. Again, dollars, date, and feeling. But I also am okay with adjusting those goals as you
Of
grow
course.
and mature. I think that's very important to do. But you set that goal, and then along the way to that goal, you may reach it sooner. So the time may be right now because Kris helped them grow the business, 5-fold. Or they may say, well, you know what? My goal initially was to exit for 1.5, but man, I'm loving what I do now because I'm so autonomous. The business is running itself because Kris is doing everything for me. I think I'm going to let it grow for another year because now I understand that when I add 250,000 in discretionary earnings over the next 12 months, that's going to add $1 million in value to my business. So I can wait another 12 months for another $1 million.
Yeah.
You really, once you have that understanding and that knowledge, there's like a peace of mind that comes over you. And when you have those really tough days or weeks or months that we all have as entrepreneurs, you can get over them much quicker because you have that end goal in mind. You're working
Yeah.
towards something. You're not
Yeah.
just grinding it out every day. You're working
Yeah.
towards something.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, and that's really the fun part, I think, too.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, and so I guess maybe when you guys are auditing, because do you guys have a filtration process, I'm sure, where obviously you advise them and you're like, okay, we think we can, we think you're a great company that we can take to exit and help with that? Or are there some instances that you're just like, you guys aren't ready yet and you turn them away and have them come back? But like, I guess ultimately my question is, do you guys look over annual earnings and then like primarily, or is it like quarterly earnings and doing quarterly growth? Like, what are
Good
some of
question.
those initial metrics that you look at? Yeah.
Good question. So there's a company out there called Centurica.com, Centurica.com. And
Mhm.
they're a due diligence firm owned by a guy named Chris Yates. And Chris has become a friend over the years. It's an odd relationship because we represent the seller, but we really like it when a buyer uses Centurica to really do a deep dive and get a better understanding of the business in due diligence. You'd think that people representing the seller don't want people to hire a professional due diligence company. So I interviewed Kris about that very same thing. I know the answer, and I knew the answer. I just want to get his feedback. And
Yeah.
Chris's point was that anytime he's doing due diligence on a company where somebody's made a letter of intent on a company that had only presented annual returns, annual P&Ls, or quarterly P&Ls, 99 out of 100 times they're hiding something. meaning that trends have gone down in the last 3 months. That's why they're doing quarterly. Or numbers are off in the last 6 months. That's why they're doing annual returns. So anytime we do an analysis on a business evaluation, it's a view of the monthly P&Ls. I've said it a
Okay.
1,000 times. Send me a P&L with a monthly view going back as far as you can in time, right up to the most recently reconciled month, and then export it to Excel untouched. Everything is in one tab, and each column represents a month. Send that to me. So what
Yeah.
the advisor does at that point is builds an add back schedule. They'll need your input and feedback, but it's, the bottom line number is net income. It's not EBITDA, it's net income. But
Right.
you pay yourself a $100,000 salary, or you run your mobile phone through the business or your car, and these things are personal benefits. If you had a one-time expense in the business, like a utility patent in the last 12 months, that's an add back. Cash back money is an add back. Your salary is
Right.
probably an add back. Your mobile phone, your car, those are add backs. So you get net income plus the add backs equals to seller's discretionary earnings. That deep analysis is done to firm up where you are today in terms of discretionary earnings. And then conversations with you about the 4 pillars, really 5, the motor that keeps them all together: risk, growth, transferability, documentation, and you, the owner of the business. All of that determines where in the multiple range your business falls. So, if your business is really great and doing really well, and you're in that top range and you're at a 4-time multiple, then we know the exact discretionary earnings. But if I'm ballparking discretionary earnings and it's off by 10,000, that means I've either overpriced or underpriced your business by $40,000. $40,000 will pay for, a couple of years tuition at a good state school. So we drill down into it and we look at the numbers. The numbers matter dramatically. So we get pretty detailed in that, but then those 4 pillars are critical as well. And again, I just mentioned, and you smiled, that 5th pillar that isn't, it's the mortar that holds them all together, the person behind the business. If you're a good human, that adds value. If you're humble and sincere and thoughtful and you've built a great business, buyers are going to trust you more. And when they trust you more, they're going to give you more value for your business.
So, because that ties into one of my questions, is the you part, which is the
Yeah.
entrepreneur. Um, you mentioned that you interviewed, over 8,000 entrepreneurs. So I'm going to ask this in a twofold question. The entrepreneurs that maybe are just starting their new venture, and after doing this for so many years now, the ones that have built a great business, what are some of those common traits in those entrepreneurs that really stands out to you as being like, that has informed your current sort of like framework when you do meet new entrepreneurs?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Is there?
So they're thoughtful in building the business to begin with. They've got a
Mhm.
good risk profile, multiple SKUs. They've got clean documentation, not perfect books, financials, but clean at the very least. And they haven't done anything tricky or sketchy in the last, 3 years, let's say. If they made mistakes early on, that's understandable. They matured, they grew, they overcame problems, and they, had the business growing further. Um, I kind of guess. Let me answer the question with a couple of stories, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would
And I can
love
get
that. Oh my
I can
gosh.
get long-winded, so shut me up anytime. But early on in my career as M&A advisor, multiples were low. This whole internet thing, people were thinking it was too risky and wouldn't pay a high multiple. And there was a content site. I can't remember the name of it at the moment. I think it's in the book. Owned by a guy named John, 72 years old. And John had owned the business for 17 years, which is crazy, unheard of, right? I mean,
Yes,
he
that's a
started about the
long
same
time.
time I launched my first $50 website.
Mhm.
And he and his wife traveled the world, and they wrote about their travels, and they had daily contests that people would answer for prizes. And John earned money through affiliate and advertising money. Multiples were 2.7 max at the time. And I said, John, look, we round things. I list them at 2.7, so it rounds down to 2. I listened to 2.74, so it rounds down to 2.7.
Yeah.
They said buyers are just pushing back on anything 2.8 or higher. He said, Joe, let me worry about that. I want to list it at 4 times because I believe that's the true value of the business. Let's just get people on the phone so I can speak to them and have them really understand the business that I've built. And I said yes, because John was so impressive, such a good human. He cared about what he built, and he wanted a great owner to take over. He was doing 400,000 in discretionary earnings. What would have been, a $1.1 million listing turned into a $1.6 million listing because John was a good human, impressive, full of character, trustworthy, likable guy you just want to have dinner with. He had multiple offers. We sold it at just above 1.6 million. Had people flying into Florida to meet with him because they liked him so much. On the other hand, I had a business that was a great business listed for sale by somebody that was a little younger who hid something from me, and I didn't find it, and that taught me a lesson. I listed the business for sale, and then I get an email from somebody that says, "Hey, Joe, is this the person that owns the business?" And they shared a link and period. And then he said, "If it is, I'm out." I clicked the link. Turns out he was a registered sex offender. Um, so I then had to have a conversation with him about it, and he told me a story that may or may not have been true in defense of himself. And we ended up, it's funny, my business partner, who's happened to be in the car when I called him about it to chat with him. His wife was in the car with him, and she said, "Well, how does that affect the value of the business?" And she had a great point, and she was right in that sense, but it erodes the trust, right?
Yeah.
No one wanted to give this sex offender $1 million. Bottom line. That's what I had listed for. So we ended up, it flailed and nobody wanted to jump on it. Taught me a lesson, no matter what, I will do my own online due diligence of people now. You can find just about anything you want to online about a person's present and past. So be careful what you post online. Be careful what with political stances, anti-vax stances, things of that nature, and how you behave. We tell our kids this. I've got an 18 and 20-year-old, and what they post on Instagram because their future employers are going to look, or their girlfriend's grandmother is going to look. An
Yeah.
actual lesson that my 20-year-old was taught. Be careful what you post online. The same goes true for your business. Your greatest asset is for sale. Take down your funnel shots with no top on, and whatever you do, just take them down. I actually did a podcast interview like this once, where I was kind of blown away with the podcast host because he had a clear political stance. He had a make America great hat and shirt on again. And I thought, well, it's okay. That's a choice. I won't tell you which side of the table I'm on. I said that's understandable. But what he's doing is alienating 50% of his potential audience, right? Because it's a harsh political climate now. So if you're selling your business and you do those types of stances, a buyer who is, a far left person, a Trump hater, they're not going to buy your business just because of the sweatshirt that you wore and that you posted online. It's that emotional. The trust goes that deep. So, John was just an incredible character, likable, trustworthy, and it got him more than an extra $500,000 on closing day. Whereas the other gentleman hid something, was not trustworthy or likable, and I believe he still owns the business today. And he had a full-time job too, so he was selling because he was worn out and tired. And I'm sure the business is declining if he still has it at all.
You actually use a very important word inside Sugatan, which is trust, because
Mm.
it's 360 with us. Um, we always say that the only reason why the founders are saying here with their business is because they trust us. And also, what actually builds the, uh, for us, we understand that advertising principles are evergreen It's the same principles. It's just that the platform itself is different. So back then, before social media, we had a 10-minute slot for infomercials. So then you had the whole funnel in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's on feed, it's on social media. And so now you have to figure out how to do all of that in 2.5 minutes, because that's how fast they make a decision. And we actually break it down by saying every single part, you have to break it down by seconds, because every single part, like the opening frame, then the next 2 seconds, then the next 5 seconds, and then they're going to look at the comments, and then they're going to go look at the website. And every single part of that has to deepen the trust that they're going to get what it is that you're advertising. Then there's our new hires. We have, once we hire them, we have a process where we qualify them for 2 weeks. And at the end of those 2 weeks, we always ask the mentor, do you trust this person? I.e., are they reliable? Did they show up when they said they were going to show up? Did they do what they said they were going to do? You know, and that's really we literally call it a trustworthy tracker. It's
Mm-hmm.
like we've gamified it by points.
It's everything.
It's everything,
Yep.
because ultimately we're humans,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, business to business, it's really human to human. The whole thing is very human centric. So it's, you know, just going back down to trust, because it's a huge principle for us inside Sugatan.
Yeah, no doubt. If you can, no matter business or personal life, right? So you, in business, part of, let me put it this way. I look back to my professional career and I think about, where did I excel? And I talk to a lot of people about this, especially after they've sold their business and they're going to move on to their next adventure. And, back when I launched JVI Media back in 1997, I was the person in the middle between the product owner and the call center. And the product owner is spending $100,000 a week and sending their calls to the call center. And I'm the guy that's spending their money, and I've got to make sure that relationship between the two of them stays strong. And this is an actual case. I had to, break up fights once a week. So I was always in the middle of those relationships and building trust with each of them and trying to build a bridge of trust for both of them. And I just listened to a podcast that talked about this, and then fast forward to today, and this is exactly what I do now, Kris. I'm not actually in the middle of the transactions anymore, but my company is in the middle of the transactions between buyers and sellers, and it's building that trust, right? That seller initially, has to trust me and my firm with what is likely their greatest asset in order to achieve their financial goals. Um, we don't we're probably not the one we're not rah-rah salespeople that are promising a huge multiple just to get you to sign an engagement letter. We're going to tell you the
Right.
truth. We're going to
Yeah.
work with you with the truth and helping you build a better business. But you've got to have that trust with your clients, with your employees, as a business owner, and your employees looking up to you, and vice versa, in order to, I don't know, live well and be a good human, right? You're the average of your 5 closest friends or colleagues. It's so true. You just got to
Yeah.
focus on that trust. And I think, I haven't said it yet, but this is where, your clients that are growing these businesses, a lot of people that are not in their space or your space where, entrepreneurship is like, well, you have a great business doing, $2 million a year in revenue. Why would you ever sell that? And it's because you do get tired and worn out and need to move on to your next adventure. And more importantly, you understand who you are. I look back at, again, 1997, what was I good at? 2021, what am I good at? It's the same thing, different business, but the same thing. If I'm not cautious, I could promote myself within my business, either my business size or what I do in my business, to my level of incompetence. And that's when things fall apart. So you may be a bootstrap entrepreneur that can go from 0 to 5 million in revenue, but can you go from 5 to 10? Can you go
Right.
from 10 or 20 to 100? Not everybody's built that way. And so if you understand yourself, like I do now, you know your level of incompetence, and you say, okay, this is when the time is right to get out. I'm going to sell and move on to my next adventure and focus on the things that I'm good at.
Yeah. What okay, so just touching on that, what are some of the signals? Because I think that when you're in it, there is that, I think, inherent, if you're an entrepreneur, you're usually a self-learner, you're usually very ambitious. I think that a lot of times the focus, or like they're very opportunistic. So then they're just like, let's go there, let's go there, let's go there. And they may not be strong at those things. Like,
Yeah.
how do you, maybe what are some, in your experience, some of the initial signals? Because definitely I've experienced that. You
Mhm.
know, what I'm really good at is the concept for things to go viral. And then and building the machine around that. We are literally a content creation machine.
Yeah.
And then I tried to build campaigns, I tried to do email marketing, and then like CRO. And I get conceptually all of those things, but they're actually not the things that actually drive the most revenue the way that a viral ad does. And so I'm just learning this lesson like, oh man, got to go back to your strengths because all those other things are distractions
Right.
that are taking you away from the things that you're good at.
It's back to avoiding the statement, I can do that, and flip it to just because I can doesn't mean I should. But there's different approaches. You've got to, look inside of who you are and what you like and enjoy. Go old school. Look at that. I'm going to hold them up. I don't know if you can see them. I can't see what's
I can
happening
see
here,
it.
but I have two devices. I have a remarkable, fully electronic notebook, and I have a notebook. This is the one that I actually use. Pick that up and divide it into two sides and write everything down that you like and dislike about your business and the work that you do in it, and make sure that those things that you don't like are not areas that are taking up a lot of your time, because then you're promoting yourself to your level of incompetence. You don't like them, so you're not going to do them the best you can possibly do them because you don't enjoy it, and eventually you're just going to burn out and just wake up one day and say, I hate this, I got to sell. So really
Yeah.
focus on what you like and enjoy and are really good at, and don't go with just because I can, I should, right?
Doesn't mean that you
You can
should.
learn
Oh,
CRO. You can learn SEO and CRO and email marketing and all that other stuff. And you can then sell it to your clients and just provide more services to them. But should you? Not if you're incredibly good at what you do now. But it differs by personality. I was on a
yeah.
mastermind call with a woman named Cody Sanchez, who is huge. She's an influencer in the buying businesses, um, buying unsexy businesses, as it said, right? Laundromats, car
I've seen
washes.
her. I've seen her, one of her videos. Yeah,
Yeah, she's fantastic.
she's
And
great.
and Cody has 26 businesses that she currently owns. And that's great. And she puts a CEO in place every time, and she can do that really well. I own one business at this time in my life. I've owned multiple businesses, and I find that, well, I take it back. I own one business, but my book is a separate LLC. So technically I own two, but they're sort of entwined together. Um, my approach is, at this point in my life, right? I'm 56 years old. I focus on the one business and I do that one thing incredibly well. And I know I'm not going to do it forever, Kris. It's the reality of it. I'm going to die, right? I'm going to want to move on from this business at some point in my life. But while I'm focused on it, I'm going to do it really well. Could I launch a platform that sells lower value businesses that's more of a marketplace? Yes. Should I? Not if I really want to continue to grow and serve the quiet light clients, right?
Mhm.
Could I stop doing podcasts and travel the country and get on stages and do these things in front of people live? Well, not with COVID right now, but I don't know if that's something I want to do. You got to really, I think, hone in on what you like to do, what you're great at, what you're good at, what you don't like to do, and try to pawn those things off. It's a terrible way of saying it. Try to delegate those things that you're not so good at to other folks, so that you can focus on what you enjoy. And your business will thrive because of it. You'll be
Yeah,
happier, probably run it longer, and have more valuable business when you do eventually exit.
which I think ultimately is the majority of the people for sure. Um, Joe, this has been such an amazing, enlightening conversation that I know I got a lot of value out of. And I'm hoping that our listeners have gotten a lot of value out of. And we have a gift for our listeners. And that is that you can, first of all, the EXITpreneur's Playbook is on sale on Amazon, which is where I got your book originally. But we are giving you guys a free PDF that you guys can download. And you guys can do that on exitpreneur.io/Sugatan. I'm going to spell it phonetically here. Exit, EXITpreneur, PRENEUR.io/Sugatan, SUGATAN. And Joe, I'm really looking forward to having you more on our podcast, hopefully, and exchange stories and hopefully be intertwined, in our journeys as we go along. And for everybody that's listening, you will definitely hear about it, because I think that it's great to just have good people who are supporting each other as part of our community. So
I couldn't agree more. I'm happy to provide the digital copy of the book. Just it's can be a PDF on your computer, or you can download it to your mobile and read it on your Nook, your Kindle, whatever it might be. And I think it'll help, right? I think it'll help just give you a reference to go back to and learn at your own pace. And I think you're doing great things, Kris. So, your clients have to be happy with the work that you're doing and the podcasting that you're doing, helping people understand, the value of their e-commerce businesses and how to grow them the way that you grow them. So I'm happy we connected. I'm glad we're in the same circle now, and I look forward to connecting with you again.
Me too, Joe. And if they want to reach out to you directly, how can they do that?
They could hit me up with an email at joe@quietlight.com. Joe at EXITpreneur.com. No, it's not .com, it's .io. Or LinkedIn, which I'm trying to check every day now. But if you just Google me, you'll find me. You can connect with me and let me know how I can help in any way.